Are you interested in deepening your spiritual awareness and discovering your true nature as divine? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Align with the Divine. With me, your host, Patricia Diorio, spiritual mentor, sacred storyteller, and professional intuitive. Join me and my amazing guests each week for a deep dive into the exciting world of spirituality. Align with the Divine will inspire you to embrace your innate power to create your reality. It will motivate you to move past your limited thinking, release your subconscious programming, and show you how to live in the present moment with clarity and focus. Get involved with the show. Send your email to patricia@patriciadiorio.com. This is Align with the Divine. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Align with the Divine. Today is a very special day. You want to know why? Because it's the launch of this podcast, the very first show. And I have a wonderful guest for you, a guest I specifically invited to be my very first guest because I wanted him to set the tone for Align with the Divine. My guest is Paul Seig, who is the channel, I say channel, not author, but channel of an amazing book called I Am the Word. The authors are actually ascended masters, non-physical beings who are coming through Paul, bringing important teachings to humanity. And the most important message that they bring us is that we are divine. In fact, they say, and I love this, you cannot not be God. And the one thing that humanity needs to learn more than anything else is to stop denying who we truly are. We're spiritual beings in physical form. That's their primary message. There are now 10 books, with the 11th book coming out in the summer. It's called the Book of Innocence, and I can't wait for that to happen. So I want to tell you a story about how this book came into my life and why it's so important to me. On my 70th birthday, which was 8 years ago, yes, indeed, I'm 78, I shook my fist at God that day, and I said, hey, God, I've been helping so many people for 26 years to deepen their spiritual awareness. What about me? I'm ready to go to my next level. What's next for me? Well, that very day, a good friend of mine, a fellow by the name of Stu Zimmerman, said to me, Patricia, you need to get this book. I said, book? I need another book? Have you seen my library, how many books I have on spirituality? You're going to give me a book that's going to give me something new? He said, Patricia, get the book. So I said, well, what's the name of it? And he said, it's called I Am the Word. Well, as soon as he said that, I felt this churning in my solar plexus, which I thought was unusual. I had never really felt that before. So I called the local bookstore and I asked the owner there, I know well, Teresa, hey, Teresa, you ever hear of this book, or do you have this book, I Am the Word? She said, no, never heard of it. Order it for me. So she did, and I went down to pick up, and it was this very book. Well, I had never had this experience either. I could feel the book. It's like a living document. I could feel it. It was palpable, and I couldn't wait to get home and start it. Well, I could not get enough of it. It was like I was dying of thirst, and this was the coolest, freshest, sweetest, clearest, most thirst-quenching water I could ever take. And I drank in this book. I read it 3 times the first year without even seeing Paul Channel. And I could see and I could feel the changes were already happening in my life. It was an amazing experience. Now, 8 years later, it's my 9th year, I'm totally committed to the work, and I've incorporated it in my practice. And I invite you to go to my new website, which is called, surprised, Align with the Divine. And on the first page, there's a free gift. It's a training that I did called the 7 Keys to Successful Manifesting, which pretty much are the bones, give us the bones of my work, and I incorporate information about the book and the word work in that training. So I invite you to check it out. I hope you enjoy it. So Paul Selig, an amazing fellow, just to give a little bit of information to you. Paul is born in New York City and was really an East Coaster and a New Yorker for a long time. Now he's in Hawaii in a beautiful new home and living a very, very different life than he was living when this work came into his life. Paul was a serious fellow, and I noticed that when I started watching him online that he wasn't really smiling very much, and he seemed kind of, I wouldn't say this word, but he used it himself, a bit of a curmudgeon. And today he is like, he's a happy, happy fellow, and realizes that this really is the work he came here to do in this lifetime. But his background is as an academic. He graduated from NYU, New York University, and he has a master's from Yale. He's a playwright, and he taught playwriting. And he also was on the Master of Fine Arts board at Goddard College, where he taught there as well. He is indeed an amazing fellow because he's also an empath, a psychic in his own right. He calls himself a psychic for the living. So he's able to tune into a person and if they have a question, and to really help them to get clear on whatever might be up for them in their lives that they need help with. So he did that for 18 years quietly in his home while he was a professor at NYU. And so now, 10 years later, he is now completing his 11th book as the channel for the guides. And I think you're going to really love this conversation. I know that I am. So sit back and enjoy. And thanks again for tuning in to Align with the Divine. Paul, I am so delighted and excited to be sitting here with you today, and you all the way in Hawaii and me in Santa Barbara, California. And it's going to definitely be a high point in my life, because I'll tell you why. I'm starting a new podcast, and you are my very first guest. Now, I've done a lot of interviews, right? But you are going to launch my podcast, which will be launched, I believe, this Friday.
Wonderful.
So I'm really excited about it. And I'm grateful to you that you're doing my very first show, because usually people who are guests want to have, well, how many people do you have watching the podcast? And, you know, how many? And I know that I'll have many people watching the podcast, especially if you're launching it. So why? Because I want the message to be what the name of the podcast is, Align with the Divine. Really and truly align with the essence of who we are. So that's why I asked you, and it's setting the tone for all the rest of the guests I'll have on the show in the future. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, this sounds kind of like a trite question, because I've seen many of your interviews, and usually the interviewers will ask you this, but I think it's important for people to know why you're doing this, but how you got into the channeling and why you're doing this. So that's kind of like a two-part question.
Well, I wasn't looking to get into this. I wasn't even somebody who necessarily believed in channeling. I was sort of an atheist. But I had a bit of an awakening when I was 25. That came not because I thought it would be nice to have a spiritual life, but because I hit a real wall. And I started praying because I didn't know what else to do. And I got an answer, and I followed it, and my life began to change. I studied a form of energy healing a couple of years later, and I was volunteering at a center for people that were living with life-challenging illness. It was the height of the AIDS epidemic, and people were dying all around me that I knew and cared about. So I found that when I had my hands on people's bodies, I began to hear things for them. And I began to check it out. I would tell people what I was hearing, and they would verify it. And that was the beginning of clairaudience for me, and unexpected. And it wasn't like it is today. Now the guides I work with lecture through me. Initially, it was a little like something, a voice appeared, or a new thought appeared, that would be a better way to say it, from all of the static in my mind. Something would pierce the static and all that incessant chatter that had a very different texture and tone and resonance to it. And I began to trust that voice more. And that was the beginning. I did a group in my apartment for 18 years. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't want them to. I wasn't looking to be public with this at all. I was a college teacher. But I was so interested in the experience of the work and the energy that would come through in very palpable ways when the guides worked through me, that I was just fascinated and wanted to continue to do it. And that's still why I do it. I sometimes say, if there were, back in those days in my apartment, sometimes 3 people would show up for an evening. Now, there can be a few thousand online and a few hundred in person. And I still think if it was only 3 people, I'd continue to do it.
Yes,
I'm so interested. And I don't always agree with the teachings. I can't refute what they say, but they're challenging teachings for me personally. But my job really is to be a radio, and I feel that I was developed for this, and everything that I've done prior has been in support of this in one way or another, not that I knew it when it was happening. And I'm just really grateful that I get to show up for this work, and it is my work,
It is your work.
That way, yeah.
It's your soul's work. And even though you're not the author, so to speak, you are the channel. I wanted to ask you in regard to the very first time the guides came through, because I haven't been clear on that. I know you were doing your empath work for 18 years, and it was kind of like undercover, if you will. When was it that you actually heard the guides speak to you about, okay, Paul, we're going to be doing this now?
That's not how it happened at all. I don't know that happens for anybody that way. I started to tell this story. I was 25 years old. I was about a year out of Yale. I was a grad student there. I was working on a project in Minneapolis. I was a bad drunk, and I was developing a drug habit. And I didn't know what was wrong with my life, but I knew something was. And the Gideons leave these little books in the room, in the hotel rooms. And I said, prayer for people in crisis. And I went, well, I don't have anything else to do, so let's say it, because I meant it. And 3 days later, I woke up back in New York, and I asked myself what I could do for myself that day that was positive. And I heard a voice, and it told me what to do. And I listened to it, and my life changed. That was the first voice. And it's not a voice in the room. I don't know where people get that, like there's somebody in the room talking.
Right.
It's really telepathic. It's like a thought that blocks out all other thoughts, that has its own texture. That was the beginning. And I think when I go back, there were a few times that I got information that way in those early years. And I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for the guides I work with to get through to me, because boy, was I dense, and confused. Go ahead.
Sorry, I heard that I think the guides, I read this in the books, that you and the guides had a contract coming into this lifetime that you would.
I've heard that since, that I agreed to this ahead of time. They don't talk about contracts. I think if they did, I'd run in the other direction, because I don't like them, And the guides, more than anything else, honor free will.
Yes.
They speak about aligning our will to the higher will. But yeah, I heard that I had agreed to this. I don't have a way of verifying that. I have some past life recall where I was involved in mysticism, and back in, where was it? It was in Florence, where I've yet to go, back in the Renaissance. But that's all and that I didn't even know. That showed up in dream, and then in language, and then I checked it out on the internet, and it panned out, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. But I don't know if that's about this work. So I don't feel, truthfully, that this makes me special. I'm very concerned when people get into the specialness of their spiritual practice, because I think that that's a trap. And it's a trap that most of us encounter. In my early years, I went, oh my God, I'm special. And, honestly, I've come to the realization that the most evolved person in my community may be the old lady who does the crossing guard at the school section, and not the person sitting on the dais in a white robe with a giant crystal. There's a place for all of it. There are all different ways forward, but I don't know that what I do, which I think is an odd skill, is a more valuable skill than the crossing guard. We're both helping people, that's all.
Forgive me for interrupting you.
Mhm.
I recall you saying that every one of us has the ability to do this channeling work. However, it's a skill, and you
Yeah,
have developed this
I
skill.
did. Yeah, I've worked a long time. Yeah, I have.
Exactly.
No, it's, I mean, there's the one thing that I have done consistently is show up for this,
Yeah.
often in the face of ridicule and when it wasn't convenient to what I wanted and who I thought I should be. I'm living a wonderful life right now. I'm very grateful for it. It's not a life that I would have chosen for myself because I didn't know it was on the menu to choose. So I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
I think, the metaphor that I use sometimes is, anybody can play basketball, I guess, but I'm never going to get picked for a team
Right.
because I'm not tall enough and I'm not fit enough and I'm not fast enough. So I'm built in a certain way, and there are some skills that I think I came in with and skills that were developed that makes it more possible. I had been a playwright when I was a young man, and I used to induce trance when I was writing, but I didn't know that I was inducing trance. I would just put one piece of music on loop, sometimes for hours at a time, and just sit there and do that. And that's how I wrote. I would have to move into an altered state. That involved craft and crafting. And the difference between inspired work, which is wonderful, and channeled work is
Right.
channeled work doesn't involve crafting.
No.
Channeling is dictation.
Mhm.
In the books, there's now the 11th book is coming out in a couple of months. And, there's no editing. It's just how it comes out. That's the book, and that's how I do it.
I think that that's one of the most remarkable aspects of this work is that the 11th book is coming out, and not one of the books have been edited. It's just amazing that, and they're beautiful. I think they're beautifully written. I love reading them. I love the sense of humor of the guides as well.
Uh-huh.
There's so many places that I can go with questions for you, but I want to focus on three things. When I share about this work, what I do is I tell people, I say, I have three gifts that I've received from this work.
Mhm.
First gift is that I know my vibration has been shifted. So the
Mhm.
first thing is vibration. Our vibration is lifted, and everyone's vibration is lifted, even if they don't
Yeah.
read the book, just hold the book. So
Mhm.
my vibration has been lifted. So it raises your vibration. The second thing is that it's really helped me to go beyond the known,
Mhm.
because the
Yeah.
we know the known,
Mhm.
to go beyond the known. So now, believe me, in the 80s, I was the affirmation queen. You would have laughed at me. Now I don't do that anymore. Now what I do is I take what I'm working on and I
Mhm.
lift it to the upper room. We'll talk about that in a moment. Upper room where I know that I'm making it new by declaring it. Behold, I make all things new. And I'm
Mhm.
letting go of my attachment to how I, Patricia, think is supposed to show up, and just
Mhm.
completely let the universe do its
Mhm.
job in
Yeah.
the unknown. So that's been
Great.
tremendous for me.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
third thing, and I think it's the most important thing, for many, I'm going to preface it by saying this, for many years, I believed that we were divine beings having a human experience, spiritual beings having a human experience, going all the way back to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and Deepak Chopra and all those guys. I believed it. And
Mhm.
this book helped me move from believing it to knowing it.
Mm.
Knowing it. So I would appreciate it if you could share from your perspective something on those three things: vibration, the unknown, and moving from believing to knowing.
I don't know that I can. I mean, the teaching of the guides has always been a teaching of co-resonance. The guides say there's one note sung in the universe that's being outpictured or in manifestation as everything we see and can imagine, and that things are operating at different levels of tone or vibrational accord. And so when we're operating at a certain level, we are aligning to a certain level of reality. And when they teach the upper room, which they say is another level of consciousness, they call it the octave above the common field. The common field reality, as we understand it, is an octave of tone, notes, and sound. And when they lift us to the upper room, they're giving us access to what expresses or exists beyond that. And when you align at that level, you're shifting your vibration, and then consequently, you're calling to you that which aligns at that level of tone or vibration. because we're always in a chord, and they say A-C-C-O-R-D or A-C-H-O-R-D is on a piano with everything that we see and experience. And we do this individually and we do this collectively. So that's vibration. And the second one was what?
Unknown, the unknown.
Well, the unknown. Well, what's just beyond the known is the idea that the guides say we're always ordering off of the menu of what we expect to have. And the small self, which is the personality structure, knows itself entirely through historical data. It's really a compilation of learned information. What a world is, what a man is, what a sky is, what a high aspiration is. All of these things in most ways have been codified through historical experience, and we've gone into agreement with those things. It's better to be rich than poor. So, I get that. I've been very poor. It's more comfortable, but who the hell? And the guides say, people are learning lessons about abundance in different ways. And many of these things are opportunities. Everything's an opportunity to learn through. So, Beyond the Known, which was the title of the last trilogy of books, yes, was when they were lifting us to the upper room at a level of recognition and experiential recognition. And you talked about the knowing. And the one thing I like about this work, and what relieves me about this work, is that the energy that comes through for most people, and for me, is palpable. So back in my apartment, I needed something that I couldn't refute or I needed proof. That was who I was. And I had an experience of energy when I was 25 that was large and very physical for me, that perhaps helped me on this path that I'm now on. But when I started studying energy work, I could feel the energy, and the client could feel the energy. And I went to somebody for a few years before I studied, and I could feel the energy. So if I could feel it, or I could see it, or I could hear it, and it could pan out, that was enough for me. I'm not a good New Ager. If somebody were to wave a wand over my head and say, you're all fixed, I'd say, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I want to know it. I want to know it in my experience. The guides say this small self, which is the personality structure, it's part of who we are. It's just not who we truly are. The small self thinks and the true self knows. And so when you start aligning to that aspect of the self that does know, you begin to have another experience of this. And for me, what that's done, and it's not that I don't question, and I certainly don't pretend to be ascended. Thank goodness, I'm here and I'm learning like everybody else is, in the best ways I can. I don't know what to say. The idea that, we have capacity for this innately.
Yes.
Each one of us, I think, is high. People are very busy sort of wanting to channel or wanting to hear beings outside themselves. But I have always said that clear cognizance, which is true knowing,
yes,
is really the highest, because then you're just living in flow. And the guides are really taking us there now in their work, to be in that kind of flow.
And how I look at it is that, and the guides tell us this, that a belief is from the intellect. It's from the intellect, and a knowing is not from the intellect. A knowing is from the heart. It's in every cell of the body. It's like we know our name. No one has to ask me if I believe my name is Patricia. It's like, so that is the greatest gift the work has given me, has been that place of knowing. And you said you're not ascended, but we are ascending. We are in the process of ascending, no? I mean, that's how
the challenge with the word ascending is it carries a lot of baggage about where we're supposed to be, or we're supposed to be someplace other than we are. So ascending, in my mind, is simply moving to a higher level of vibration and awareness. And they're bringing us, I hope, because that's what they're teaching, to an awareness of unity, that we're not separate from Source. We're an expression of Source. But it's like, imagine that you thought, wouldn't it be nice to go swimming in the ocean? When I'm swimming in the ocean, I'll be ascended, but we're already swimming in the ocean. We just don't realize it. So that's, I think, what this is about. The idea of escaping a reality through spiritual work is difficult, and it's a trap for a lot of people. So I'm going to amass as much evidence and as many crystals as, to get someplace that I'm not. And I understand that. I was there when I was a young man, I was so unhappy.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm understanding now that the essence of this teaching is about presence and being. And that's not efforted. You're not trying to ascend, you're being at a level of experience and tone. What I like about what the guides teach is they say when you begin to align at that level, you are lifting the world. And you can call that ascension, I suppose, through presence and being, because you're operating at a level of vibration where what you encounter is lifted by it. And that's why, I've always said this isn't a selfish teaching. It's really not, and it's fine if people want to get into this stuff, just like I did, because of pain. But I think finally the guides have much bigger fish to fry than whether we get the fancy house or the perfect child doing perfectly in school or in the world, these things that people want. I think they care more about how we be and how we show up for one another and how we love. And I'm really understanding that more and more.
I think one of the things that impressed me when, the three phrases, I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve. And when you think about how you serve, your mind goes to, well, speaking or teaching or healing or doing something. But what I'm getting is how we serve is by simply being, vibrating at that highest frequency we can sustain while we're in the body.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah.
They say how one serves is how one is most fully expressed as, they call it the true self or the monad or the God within or whatever you want to call it. There's a name for it in every religion. I have a Jesus over there. I have a Hanuman over there. I've got a Buddha over there.
No, I've got that too.
Yeah, there are different ways of comprehending this. But
I
the
think
divine spark is it. Yeah.
I think in the first book, it turned people off because I had many clients that got turned off with the term Christ, Christed frequency, the Christed consciousness. And then I noticed in the second book, they changed it to the creative self. It said, I thought maybe they got the message that this was turning off people that had bad experiences with religion. But I haven't heard the creative self throughout the other books.
No, I haven't either. And I think, thank God, and I think they took my note and my concern. Victoria Nelson, who was on the phone when the first couple of books were being dictated, had a note for the guides about their use of the masculine pronouns in the first book. And, they said, well, it's not man, it's humanity, was their response. But every book since then, they have switch the pronouns, sometimes in the same sentence. He realizes when he knows who he is, what she really has always been. Meaning, and the copy editors would go, what are you doing? And I said, I'm not, this is how it came out. They're being inclusive. So I think they do take the notes up to a point. They use the Christ as a claim still, but in the last 2 or 3 years, they moved to monad as what they speak of. And the monad and the Christ, I think, and the true self are all indistinguishable. They'll often say, call it what you wish.
Call it what you wish.
Monad, Christ within, true self, eternal self, inner light. It's up to you. Really, they could care less. It's we who get hung up on this stuff. Somebody wrote me, I'm sure it was intended to be a nice email early on, saying you need to tell your guys to stop using this word. And I was like, no, they were telling me to stop using this word. And it's like, I don't write the books, taking dictation in a chair, and I thought, well, that was interesting, but I don't know,
What's the word, Paul? What was the word?
What was the word?
What was the word they wanted you to stop using?
Oh, whoever wrote me the email was Christ.
Oh.
I have to stop using this word.
Oh.
And then somebody wrote a couple of years ago and said, I'm writing to your publisher that all of the pronouns need to become gender neutral. and these books need to be rewritten. I thought, well, it's not my book. I took the dictation. Publisher can do what the publisher wants, but my good news with the publishers I've had is they've agreed to non-editing, that we don't get to go back and fix and change. Because honestly, there are things in the books that I go, oh my God, what a clumsy sentence. People think these books were written. They're not written, they're spoken into being and then transcribed. There's no writing at all. Yeah. So somebody said to me that I didn't know well, who came from another tradition, I think it was a shamanic tradition, said, what's interesting to me about your books is that your guides seem to be reclaiming language that was misappropriated by religion to their essence. And I think that that's very true.
That is
what these things really mean. If you've read the book Resurrection, which is the last book to come out, they really get into that stuff in a way that was challenging to me. But they're saying what things meant, what resurrection truly is, as opposed to perhaps what we've been taught.
Right.
And, I'm grateful for this. It gives me a sense of comprehension. I did an interview last week with a couple of former Mormons, and I hear the books are popular among the former Mormons. I don't know, it's because Melchizedek is the name of the guide the name I've been given for the teachers, the priesthood that works here with this stuff. So I don't know, people, but somebody else is going to be attracted to something else with totally different language attached, and that's perfectly fine. I wasn't raised with this stuff. Right. So I don't have a lot of that baggage. I'm a gay man that lived well and healthily through the AIDS epidemic, while many didn't. And the New Age was at its height then, in terms of everybody running around with the affirmations and doing the best they could in an impossible world. And I'm not a likely candidate for any of the stuff that I'm doing in many ways. In a practical way, it doesn't make sense, but this is what happened. It's how I show up, and my job is to take dictation.
Yeah. I really appreciate the guide's treatment of fear. Because based on all the work that I've done, myself personally and with my clients, fear is the boogeyman. The bottom line of everything is fear, and they really help us to almost in a way be present to the fear and yet not acknowledge it, or be present to it, but not go down that rabbit hole. Really be able to make the decision in the moment that I have choice here. I can go down that rabbit hole of fear around this relationship or finances, or whatever, or I can choose a higher vibrational thought that's going to lift me up.
Yeah, I agree.
So is there anything you'd like to add to that around their treatment of fear?
Well, one of the things they say all the time, that's one of my favorite things that they say that I am able to work with consistently, is when they say the action of fear is to claim more fear and look at every choice you've made in fear and see what it got you. It'll be more of the same. And I find that helpful because it's very practical. They've also said, which interested me, is they said fear is not wise. Fear doesn't ascend, does not lift to a higher level because it can't. Now you can reclaim fear and re-see it, because they said even fear is of God, it just denies it, because everything must be of source or nothing can be. And to lift that means to re-know it as of source, and then consequently it doesn't have the power or the torque. It just dissipates.
It dissipates. So, that's why the upper room is so important, because we can't be in fear when we're in the upper room.
Well, they say fear doesn't exist there. That's why. There's a part of you and a part of everybody listening to this that is already there in the upper room. That's the divine self, or the monad, or the Christed self, or the eternal self, whatever you want to call it. That part of us is already aligned there. And what the guides are doing is they're bringing us to that part of ourselves that expresses at that level. And that part of us that expresses at that level does not know fear. Actually, they say has never known fear, because the God within does not hold that. It's just, the new book is called the Book of Innocence. That's out soon. And they say that that's what they call that part of us, innocence. And they really explain what that means. Or the idea of being, what?
Innocence is our true nature.
Yeah, it is. But people think that it's something that it's not. Innocence is stupidity, or innocence, I haven't learned the hard lessons yet. The guides say the God within is perfect.
Right.
We're having a human experience, but the teachings are very much about aligning and allowing the God within to reclaim aspects of us that have been denied their sacredness,
Right.
their holiness. And that's the claim, behold, I make all things new. It's the reclamation of everything we experienced in source, not over there and not good enough or too damaged or too shameful or whatever. So, I mean, this is, yeah, it's interesting stuff. So that part of us, they say, has no fear. It doesn't even know fear, and we can align at that level. And if we want to experience that, we can go back down. I mean, the guides make a distinction between prudence and fear. Now, I live on Maui and there are sharks in the water. It's a big ocean. Prudence is, if the sign says no swimming sharks, probably best not to get in the water. I don't have to be afraid of sharks for the rest of my life and never get in the ocean, but I can be prudent about my choices.
One of the things I love about the work is that everybody is divine. There's no one that's special, that we're all divine. Even I don't need to get political, but even the Trumps and the Putins. And when all of this was happening, all the drama and emotionality around the politics and the war in the Ukraine, people were like this. But what do the guys tell us? To lift up Putin, to lift up Trump, to lift up the situation, which is the most powerful thing that we can do to contribute to peace and make change. So it's really about lifting people up.
I think there's different ways to look at it. An old thing that I learned back in my 12-step days was you look for the good or the God in everybody. And it's a simple, simple act. You don't have to lift anybody to the upper room. You don't have to go through the mechanics. Know that whoever is before you, whatever you think of them, whatever you think they have done or capable, they have a right to be. They're of God, even if you don't want to see them there. The guides say very simply, who you put in darkness, what you put in darkness calls you to that darkness. And what you damn, damns you back. What you bless, blesses you in return. Now, we live in a culture where they'll say, oh, well, prayers and blessings on the families of the victims. And if it's a platitude, it means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing to say, I'm lifting this one to the upper room, as if you're going to wave a magic wand. To bless something is to realize the inherent presence of the divine where it has been denied. Now, everybody's accountable to their acts. I am, you are, we all are. We call it karma. But these are all ways that we learn. Karma, I don't believe, is punishment. I believe it's opportunity to learn so that we don't have to keep learning the same damn lessons again and again. And I can be pretty thick sometimes. But I do get that we don't get to blame and be a master at the same time. That doesn't mean that crappy things don't happen and that people don't do awful things or that we've been hurt or damaged. But it is about realizing ourselves in a higher way, beyond the old ways that get us stuck in a perpetual cycle of problems.
I want to share a quick story here. I was in relationship with this fellow who invited me to sail with him to Sicily. And once I got in the middle of the ocean with this man, I realized that, oh my God, this is a mistake. And I couldn't, short of, getting a helicopter, there I was. Anyway, it was the most amazing journey because every day, he went into these fits of anger and I thought, well, this is my opportunity. This is my opportunity to really learn and grow. And one of the last days, I think the last night we were together, I was so frustrated because I think if I looked at how well I did in managing that relationship over that month, I'd give myself maybe a C- or a D, how I did it. And I had the one book with me. I had all the books recorded, but I had one book with me, and there was a book of mastery, that initiatic book, And I said to the guys in frustration right before bed, I said, okay, help me here. And I opened the book and I opened it up to the metaphor of the cave.
Oh, that's a great one, yeah.
That was so great. Would you share about that? Because I had that experience.
Well, they say, you're in that book, the guides are bringing us up a figurative mountain. And they say, this one moment, they say, okay, and now there's a cave. And you go into the cave, and who is in that cave is the one person you never want to see again as long as you live. And your assignment now is to walk them out of the cave. Because who you put in darkness calls you to that darkness, and you have called yourself to that cave through that dynamic that you've supported, which is again the denial of the divine. But they do, when they say, they get to, when you get them out of there, they say, and by the way, you don't have to have lunch with them. You don't have to go back to your abusive ex. It's not about that. It's about releasing yourself
Right.
from the bindings or the darkness that you've accrued here. And that was a tricky book. I think I just come through a rough period.
Yeah, I remember reading that it was your initiatic book. It was certainly
Oh,
mine.
it really was interesting. It was an interesting time. Some of the books are. Usually the second books in the trilogy are the real challenging ones for me, or for the reader too, because I'm proxy for the reader when this
Right.
is happening. But yeah, it was an interesting book. I remember it, and I mostly remember that exercise because I got it. I understood the illustration. Yeah.
It was perfect for me. That was a turning point in my
Good.
life. My
And I'm
turning point
glad you made it off the boat. That's the good.
yeah, it was a turning point in my relationship with men,
Thing.
with everybody, really,
Yeah.
the time is flying, and I was hoping that perhaps we might hear from the guides, and just perhaps whatever they might want to share with our viewers and listeners today.
When people ask a question like that, the guides have been known to pipe in and say, we are not the entertainment.
Right.
And so normally I'm happy to channel when it comes up in context of usually it's with a question that I can't answer. I'll ask. We're saying we would only say one thing, that on the denial of the divine is the challenge you face, and the only one, in fact, and the only one, in fact, the truth one you are. The truth of who and what you are will withstand all challenge, will withstand all challenges. You align to it as you align to it. Everything you see, if everything you see is reperceived as opportunity for growth, as opportunity for growth, you will grow wildly and wonderfully. You will grow wildly and wonderfully, and with some rapidity, yes, and with some rapidity, yes. Now we said wildly intentionally. Now we said wildly intentional. It is an adventure. It is an adventure to know the self at this level, to know the self at this level, and to be an adventure. And to be on an adventure is not to have an assured outcome, is not to have an assured outcome, a way of being that you think you should be, a way of being that you think you should be. The truth of who and what you are, the truth of who and what you are in manifestation, the truth of being you are is the truth of the being that you are, and the presence that you invoke, and the presence that you invoke in what we call the upper room, and what we call the upper room. You're escorted on this journey. You are escorted on this journey as you say yes to it, as you say yes to it, as you say yes to any potential, to your innate potential. Somebody else is right, and everybody else is right, to align at this level, though, to align to this level as well, period. And they're saying period.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
I love Michael Sandler's Inspire Nation, his interview, the interview that you did in January, when he was talking about, the 2023 and what the guides predict, and how you said, no, it's not about prediction. Share a little bit about that.
I don't remember that, truthfully. I've spoken with Michael a number of times, so I don't recall that part of the interview.
Well, what you were saying was that the guides do not give predictions.
Yeah, well, they don't. I mean, I've gotten I work two ways. I work as a channel, which is dictation. The guides are teachers, and I work as a psychic, which is, a little bit different. And even as a psychic, I don't love doing predictive work. One of my dearest friends is ace at that. That's all she likes and all she does. The guides I work with are much more invested in our relationships and how we show up. And when I read for people, I'm very good with those relationships and the dynamics that may be creating discord. But I've gotten stuff. I mean, I mention this now, and it doesn't mean anything. It's so many years later. But I got the 9/11 attack before it happened, but I got it through the back door. My ex at the time was opening a business in downtown Manhattan and wanted to know if he was going to be able to make the rent, I think, for October. And the answer was no. And he was like, why wouldn't I make the rent? And the answer was, well, there's going to be a terrorist attack in Lower Manhattan. And in fact, it was all shut down and he didn't make the rent. And I think they gave the date because he was going, oh my God, that's so close. This was like in August. And I said, well, maybe it's November because there's an 11 in it. I mean, I remember that. But that came through the back door. I was not looking for it. And when I get stuff like this, it often comes through the back door. So I'm not one of those psychics that does predictions on world events. The guides will speak to where the collective is and the kinds of challenges we may be facing. But I think they're looking at a much bigger picture than we would like to see. You know, they're looking at the evolution of humanity through our creations. What they have said is, you know, when a seed has been planted and it breaks through the soil, it disrupts the surface. There's movement. And if you think of what we're going, the guides have said this since the very first book. They say humanity is at a time of reckoning. And the reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations. And we're in this now individually and collectively. Because they're the same thing, same process.
Well, I believe I heard them say it would take 4 generations for humanity to awaken. And I won't see it. However, wherever I am, I'll see it. I think that humanity is truly headed to, sounds cliche, but heaven on earth, where we're all conscious of who we are and can consciously create a world that is going to be, for everyone, a world of love and peace.
You know, I hope. I think the work is before us. I think, when the guide said that 4 generations, I was like, well, that's not going to be popular, and it sure wasn't.
Yeah.
And then somebody else said to me, oh, how interesting. When Moses led the Jews out of Israel, it took 40 years. And then they said, and it was 40. I said, why 40 years? He said, that's how long it would take them to forget that they had been slaves. Wow. I went, well, that's interesting. So it is about a shift in consciousness where we're not just replicating the old.
Right.
I'm less focused on outcome with this and more on experience. Yeah. I think people are showing up in the world at a different level of awareness than they used to. And I'm surprised by that. And I think it's exciting and hopeful. I taught college for many, 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 many years. So I saw many generations of 18 to 22-year-olds. And then I worked in a grad program and I saw them when they were older. So I've enjoyed over the years watching how people show up. And I remember towards the very end of my years at NYU, some kid got up on a stage, or we were teaching in a space that was built like a little theater, and dropped a folder with all his papers all over the stage. And all the kids in the front row just got up and got onto the stage and picked his stuff up for him. I went, wow, this is it's a wonderful thing and a simple thing, but I thought, wow, my generation, we would have snickered, looking at the poor slob dropping the papers, and I thought, well, this is hopeful, and I am hopeful as well.
Paul, our time is flying, but please forgive me if this seems, I don't know, out of, not appropriate, but I would love for you to share anything with me personally, any blocks that I'm not aware of that I need to move in order for me to be really fully self-expressed in my work. Is there anything that you pick up?
I'll give you a very quick tune in. The guys are saying the young lady wants to know if she's going to be okay. What if she already was? What if she already was? What if there was nothing to prove, nothing to say? I am right about it. I am right about what if you have the right. What if you had the right to be as you are, to be as you are, without anybody noticing it? Would that be a reason to rejoice? We suggested would be. We suggested would be. Give yourself permission to laugh. Give yourself permission to laugh at the folly of humanity, and love them anyway, as we love you as we love you. Again, one and all. Again, one and all, in spite of how you deny love, in spite of how you deny love, or refute your worthiness of it, period. And they're saying period. That was from them. That wasn't a psychic read. Okay.
That was from them. Yes. Thank you very much. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Yeah.
My pleasure. All right.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you for the generosity of your time and for sharing your wonderful information and for the work that you do. Really, I mean, I acknowledge you for the courage and the stamina, and so happy to see your own transformation. I mean, I've observed it over the years with all the times I've seen you on the streaming, and you've really transformed into a really happy fellow.
Seems that way right now. We'll see if it lasts, but I hope it does. Thank you for saying it. I
And you
appreciate
have
it.
a wonderful smile. You do.
Thank you.
I love seeing it. So thank you very much. And I hope that you'll do this again sometime down the road. And perhaps when book 11 comes out,
Okay.
I really look forward to seeing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care now.
You and to the guides. Thank you to the guides. Thank you, Mel. I call Melchizedek Mel. That's my nickname for the guides.
Right.
So thank you both. Thanks for joining me today on Align with the Divine podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you'd like to learn more about my work, I invite you to my website, alignwiththedivine.net. And on the homepage, I'm giving away a free gift. It's a masterclass I did called The 7 Keys to Successful Manifesting. Pretty much lays out the bones of my work. Also, for a limited time only, between now and the end of August, just for the summer, I'll be giving complimentary tarot sessions, 30-minute sessions valued at $90. So if you're interested, reach out to me using my email, patricia@patriciadiorio.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again for joining me today, and namaste.